Okay. Hello, everyone. On behalf of Excelia, I welcome you all. Today, we are here to experience an insightful session on the topic rightly mentioned ESG, igniting a world reboot together. ESG has gained a greater importance among investors, policymakers, and other key stakeholders because it is seen as a way to safeguard businesses from future risks. So, without a further ado, let's begin. I am Angira Mitra, who will be the moderator for this session. Let's have a look at our topics that will be covered today: adoption and challenges for ESG, global reporting standards and frameworks, best practices, followed by the speaker segment, panel discussion, and audience questions. So, guys, we would like to have a two-way communication, so just not to make it monotonous. So, whenever I shoot a question, please make use of the chat window. Here comes the first question. Can you just please type in from which industry you come from and which are the countries you belong? Quickly, guys, just type in. Okay. Food industry, Middle East, consulting, India. Okay. Burundi, Kenya. All right. Okay, great. Okay, now moving on to the next. We have, we'll be introducing our speakers. But the first, we have Ms. Shruti Ganguly, who is Head Corporate Sustainability and ESG Solutions Satwa Consulting. Mayurika Chakrabarti, Head HSE Maersk Southeast Asia. And Mr. Isaac Katiwanga, Head of ESG and Sustainability Umeme Limited, Uganda. Okay, so we have a very short video coming your way. ESG is not merely a trendy buzzword. It represents a robust framework that empowers us to redefine our connection with the planet, cultivate inclusive societies, and establish resilient governance systems. The roots of ESG consciousness can be traced back to the 1950s when the concept of corporate social responsibility emerged. At that time, companies were urged to give back to the society by investing in sustainable initiatives like affordable housing and healthcare facilities. In 1991, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development introduced the term eco-efficiency. This concept revolved around enhancing business productivity by producing more goods and services while utilizing fewer resources and minimizing waste and pollution. The widespread adoption of ESG acronym began with the UN Global Compact Conference in 2004. This event focused on addressing environmental, social, and governance impacts that influence financial market research, analysis, and investments. The global push for greenhouse gas emissions reporting and transparency has set the stage for a race towards decarbonization. Energy giants are now committed to reducing their overall hydrocarbon production and redirecting investments towards low and no carbon products and ventures, such as wind energy. The concept of regeneration is transforming the narrative from causing harm or net withdrawals from the biosphere to making a positive net contribution. Embracing regenerative sustainability entails embracing profound change, not only in terms of built environment processes and buildings, but also for the well-being of the people and the planet. It is vital to align the development and implementation of ESG parameters. Let us join hands to achieve this sustainable growth. Okay, so I guess you guys did like the video. Quickly type in the chat box. Yes, no, maybe. Okay, thanks, Walter. Thanks, Vivian. Okay, now we will move on to a short presentation that has been prepared by the Excelia team. Very few pointers on ESG that we have. Let's have a look at it. To begin with, how ESG today looks at some interesting facts that we have. So, according to London School of Economics, there were only 800 instances between 1986 and 2014, while the number of cases between 2015 and 2022 has already topped 2,000, with around 500 litigations beginning after 2020. Recent statistics show that one of every $3 of managed assets across the globe is invested in ESG strategies to protect business from future risk. In US, ESG funds surged to 51 billion US dollars from 21.4 billion US dollars, almost doubling and nearly tenfold from 5.4 billion US dollars in 2019. For the next slides will be taken care by Ravi.
Very good morning to all of you. Thank you again. Adopting ESG policies and practices, as well as automation, comes with its own share of challenges, considering that it is first and foremost a change across people, processes, and technology used. So whether you are yet to start or at nascent stages of adoption of ESG requirements into your operational processes, do make sure to identify and prioritize your areas of focus, allocate requisite resources, and ensure all relevant stakeholders are involved and engaged. If you have already initiated the measures, keep in mind that the deployment ensures capture of all relevant data for effective reporting. Roles and responsibilities are clear. There is a clear alignment with organizational strategies, and keep the focus on measure and improve.
Okay, so again, there's a short poll coming up. How does your organization, have your organization implemented ESG? Okay, so I'm ending the poll. So now that we see the attendees who are present here, so 91% says that they have implemented ESG in the organization. That's really great, guys. Okay, moving on to a next. Is your organization following any ESG reporting framework? We'll just give 10 seconds more. Last 5 seconds, guys. Okay. So 88% of you present here says that there is a ESG reporting framework, and 13% says no. Okay, that's really different frameworks that we see. One is the ISSB, which is International Sustainability Standard Board, which was found on 2021 and 2022 under the IFRS Foundation. So the key objectives of this particular framework was it wanted to create global sustainability disclosure standards, addressing investors' information needs effectively. Then also we had SASB, which is Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, which was found by Jean Rogers in July 2011. The key objectives were providing investors with decision-useful sustainable information affecting business values, addressing material sustainability topics for industry companies, financial conditions, and performance, provide cost-effective disclosure of material sustainability information to others. Next, we had Global Reporting Initiative that was founded in 1997. The key objectives were to incorporate mandatory human rights-related disclosures for all reporting organizations, drive consistent application, encourage more relevant and comprehensive reporting. Then next comes the United Nations Sustainability, which is more prevalent these days that we see. That is the Sustainable Development Goals, which is found in 2015, which has those 17 focus areas that is being managed. Moving on to the Climate Disclosure Standard Board framework, which was found in 2007, which were the key objectives were translating sustainability information for long-term company value creation, empower informed investor decision-making for financial capital allocation, and so on. Then we had Carbon Disclosure Project that was called CDP, which was found in 2000. The key objectives were to improve environmental impact data transparency, supporting sustainable business practices through environment measurement, tracking, and reduction of impact. Then comes the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, that is TCFD, which was found in December 2015. The key objectives were to improve climate disclosures for informed stakeholders, assisting organizations in managing climate risks, opportunities effectively for strategic planning. Workforce Disclosure Initiative that was found in 2016 by Share Action NGO. Their key objectives were to enhance workforce transparency and accountability in corporate practices, providing companies and investors with comprehensive, comparable workforce data. So there are ESG rating agencies as well. So to name a few, we have MSCI, Standard & Poor Global, Sustainalytics, and Rep and Risk. The challenges of ESG measures that we clearly see these days because of the dynamic and evolving ESG regulations, there is not one particular mandate that we see, there are multiple. So focusing on which one to pick, which one not becomes like a challenge. Then also acknowledging materiality to grasp the risk of integrating ESG considerations, it is vital to comprehend sector-specific challenges. Then comes multiple ESG frameworks again. Because of the numerous regional or industry-specific standards, it becomes little challenge. There's not something which is generalized or global that way. Then comes complex ESG data management, because there are multiple data and metrics that we see, and it kind of caters to a lot of confusion, like which data to follow, and to also making sure that you are ensuring compliance. Let's have a look at some of the best practices of ESG. So you can recognize ESG risk, opportunities, and financial impacts, integrate ESG factors into business strategies, incorporate ESG mindset into risk management protocols, set up suitable governance frameworks to oversee ESG-related activities, create metrics to gauge progress towards milestones, incorporate ESG objectives into executive compensation schemes, and lastly, we have ensured transparent communication of goals and progress to all stakeholders. So we'll move on to our next segment, which is the speaker segment. So our first speaker, Mr. Isaac Katewanga, who is head of ESG and Sustainability Umeme Limited, Uganda, who is responsible for the development and implementation of ESG strategy. He has a vast experience of 20 years across public and private sectors, such as Uganda's water utility body, National Water and Sewage Corporation, Century Bottling Company. Isaac holds an MBA Finance from Makerere University and a postgraduate diploma in Tax and Revenue Administration from East African School of Taxation. He is currently undergoing sustainability reporting certification training for GRI with MK Africa and Kenya. We welcome you, Isaac, and he'll be talking about the early adoption and challenges of ESG. Over to you, Isaac.
Thank you, Angina. Good afternoon, good morning to everyone, depending wherever you are. And thanks, Excedia, for bringing us together today. You've already introduced me. I'm Isaac Richard Katewanga, head of ESG and Sustainability at Umeme. Umeme is the main electricity distributor here in Uganda, covering being responsible for over 98% of the entire customer base. So briefly, I'll just take you through the journey, and this I'm speaking from my heart, that we have taken through. And these are the 4 critical pillars. Whoever is interested in ESG should really be looking out for the 4 critical fundamental questions. Anyone you start discussing about ESG, they would want to know what is ESG all about. And in this, we really need to demystify the feeling that ESG is everything very new in this world. No, ESG has always been there, but it has just evolved and metamorphosed into what now it is ESG. But as the video showed, all the way right from the 70s, we had bits and pieces of ESG. So if anyone wants to come and appreciate what ESG is all about, we need to come from a position of saying this is nothing new we are introducing. We are only talking about it in a more critical and more organized manner. Environment, social, and governance aspects that directly have an impact on our businesses. And the second fundamental question is, how is the data, how is the information used to assess the risk, reward, and management effectiveness? How is this ESG info actually used? That is also another fundamental question we should be attempting to answer. How can we exploit? There's a lot of info, but how can we enhance it? And at the end of the day, how do you sell it to the finance person, a finance manager who looks at it like a cost? How can we demonstrate that actually ESG is not a dog, but in actual sense, it's value addition for sustainability of any business? And another critical pertinent question we need to be looking at is the how do stakeholders' expectation influence our corporate action in terms of ESG, listening in and basically getting to identify who are my stakeholders and how in terms of ESG, and how do I ensure that their expectations actually influence what we do as a business. So you need to dive in and understand who are my stakeholders in terms of running this business as regards to ESG aspects. And lastly, but also very important, is what are the key considerations, ESG considerations for each and every organization? They are unique. Organizations, companies are unique. So it's not a one shoe fits all when you come to ESG aspects. That's why you look at quite a number of even reporting frameworks, because we have come to appreciate that there are key considerations that are unique but material to respective organization. Anjira, so it will be very, very important that as we go into ESG, those I've seen already close to 90% they have adopted, that ESG should only be looked at as a framework to assess, manage risks and opportunities that the shifting market and non-market conditions actually are creating. And these have been lumped critically in these three systems: the environmental system, the social systems, and economic systems. So you need to demonstrate that in simple terms, the C methodology systems. What's the impact, the entire landscape in which an organization or a company actually operates in? What's your impact when it comes to the environment, both positive and negative, social aspect, economic? All these are critical areas that we need actually to identify and look at them to quantify whether they are actually positive impact or negative impact. And as we will demonstrate, you start appreciating that some are more material than others. It's also very, very important that we don't need to look at ESG as just about values. You've seen organizations with a number of very nice values. We live, we believe in this. Integrity is one of our values. ESG is about the ability, our ability to create and sustain long-term value in this rapidly changing world. And very important that we need to brave ourselves to manage the risks and opportunities associated with these changes. Change is a constant factor, so ESG comes in to demonstrate our ability to actually create the long-term value, and hence it's a means to sustainability. There's no way you can talk about sustainability without talking about ESG. Just bringing it home. Umeme, as I told you, is a leading electricity distributor in Uganda, and we've come up and looked at our stakeholders, defined our ambits, what are critical and what we considered as material. And we dived in. When you're doing electricity distribution, you're basically next to doing a social noble cause to the community. You are everywhere. Your distribution network moves across the entire country. You impact people's businesses. You are basically always in the spotlight. There's no single day, right from the president to the last person in the ground, they will feel the impact when it comes to electricity distribution. So one of the things we looked out for is the framework. I know there could be a lot more, but we came down and said, these are critical areas. Hence, we came up with the sustainability framework. Critical and environment, we are looking at the vulnerability in terms of climate change, the greenhouse gas emissions, our land use and biodiversity, how are we impacting the forests, the greenhouse gas emissions. These are in terms of the actual water and the electricity we consume ourselves, the number of poles, wooden poles in Uganda, we still use some wooden poles to plant, the impact that we are actually cutting down poles and we are using them to do electricity distribution, issues like using of sulfur hexafluoride, the FS6 gas in our switchgears. All these are forming part of our greenhouse gas emissions agenda. One, not only to quantify them, but also draw up strategies in which we are going to manage these greenhouse gas emissions. Waste management, as you know, all the time we're doing away with the old network. We are replacing all the poles. These are treated poles. How do we dispose them of? We generate other waste in terms of the worn out conductors. These are aluminum conductors, some are steel. The waste management of our transformer oils as we replace the transformer oil, that is also very critical. Emergency preparedness. As you know, just coupled with climate change up there, we can always have floods, storms. How prepared are we and how responsive are we? Energy efficiency, I've talked about it. And material sourcing, both we are looking at our suppliers. How are we? How compliant are they? How responsive are they when it comes to matters of ESG? Both here we're looking at both material sourcing in terms of upstream and downstream. Are the people we work with, how do we actually ensure we are aligned? Then the second big pillar is on the social aspects. We've split this into two, the human capital and the social capital. And again, big on the agenda because we deal in a very lethal product, electricity. We have health and safety being critical, not only to the staff, but also the people out there. If a conductor broke, a wire broke at any 1 minute, we can lose a life. And property, fires can set off and we lose property. Inclusion and diversity is also very critical to us. We work in a male-dominated sector because they have to climb poles. Most of it is hard labor. They have to work for long hours. How do we ensure inclusion across the spectrum, not only gender, but all the other aspects on when it comes to diversity? And then respect for human rights. That's also another very important aspect. Freedom of association. Are people free really to belong to organized associations, or it is limited? As to Meme, because we have a labor force, more than 2,300 staff, we consider this as very, very important. Under social capital, we have aspects on the communities in which we operate. Other than our distribution network, other than us supplying power to them, how do we ensure that there is actually community shared value? Do we do any community-based corporate social investments within the communities? Is there any project? So we look at this as very critical because we cannot survive in isolation. And a lot more is included under how we demonstrate for women in the community. And then lastly, but not least, electricity access. How do we ensure and enhance and quantify access, especially to vulnerable constituents? It's also one of the things we picked up under our framework. Under governance, we consider critical leadership and corporate governance, all the aspects of board composition. So far now, we have at least 2 ladies on that board. Out of it's a 10-member board. At least we have a representation of 20%, and this trickles down to the senior management team, to the next level leadership team, to ensure that and also strong governance systems that are put in place. Business ethics, anti-corruption and bribery. Being a utility, you know what I talk about. There is quite a lot of temptations out there. We have a robust anti-corruption policy in place, signed off, risk management and tax compliance. These are some of the very critical blocks within our sustainability framework. Angela. Yes, this Angela has ably taken you through, and much as we do the and actually quantify and demonstrate, the best way of sharing exactly to the world what exactly you're doing under the E and the S is through standardized and dedicated reporting. So as women, we have taken this very, very important, reporting transparently and accurately. And definitely it's a prolonged approach. When you look at the different standards, you'll find out that some are more, you'll find them, you resonate with them. So as women, we've settled earlier on, we used to use the IFC standards, IFC 6 of them. So those were our major funders. But starting last year, and I'm happy to report that 2022 report is just right here. 2022 report, the first of its kind, was as per the GRI standards. So for 2022 going forward, women being a regulated company, all our annual sustainability reports are now as per GRI standard. So we have clearly started reporting as with reference to GRI standards. Next. And it's a journey. I just want to give my friends, colleagues that are on this call, that's a journey. When you look at the maturity spectrum, you allow yourself to start small. You start with identifying KPIs that are measured for some relevant topics determined internally. We started our journey, if I could share, with basically looking at only safety and health. What can we measure under safety? Because that was also very critical. So the EHS was critical at that time. So you need to measure number of fatalities. You need to measure number of road traffic accidents. You need to measure lost time accidents at internally defined. Then the next level, the KPIs are measured according to industry standards. Like what I've shared with you already, there are some already predefined KPIs when you look at all these standards. So you look at like Sustainability Accounting Standards Board has defined a number of KPIs to follow through. Then you look at the third level, you look at KPIs that are measured according to materiality, as financial materiality. And now this is all looking at, for example, the US Security Exchange Commission has proposed climate change disclosures, basically with reference to the task force, what Angela was talking about, the task force on climate-related financial disclosures. And these are required this time now, and all the others, other than looking at them internally, you now have to publish them via the company platforms. And then at a mature stage, another level, you develop KPIs that are measured to the ESG materiality assessment. This now goes through a process of looking at it. Yes, financial materiality, these are the things. And this is what it means when it comes to financial materiality. However, now when you go to the next level, you don't only look at the financial materiality, but now you bring in the ESG materiality assessment. This goes through a process of engaging with stakeholders to actually identify the respective ESG stakeholders, what is actually material in the respective investors, employees, customers, the community. You start identifying that this is what is material in terms of ESG, and these are published and shared on company platforms for access to everyone. And then last, which is the maximum everyone will be looking out for as you go into this journey, is material KPIs are reported as per relevant disclosure systems. The issues like carbon disclosure projects, these are standardized, internationally recognized, that you'll have to be even audited to basically say, yes, before you even publish some of these, we need to internally audit and ensure you get external assurance before you publish some of these figures. So this is the last. I'm sure many of our organizations are between 3 and 4, but everyone would want to desire to reach 5. What are some of the challenges? ESG is not just, I would say, a bed of roses. It also comes with its own challenges. Those of you have been following around the EACOP, the East African Crude Oil Pipeline. You've had quite a number of this is one, or say it's going to be one of the longest heated pipeline in the East African countries of Uganda and Tanzania. And you've had a lot of, for lack of a better word, politics around ESG matters. So there's always a thin line. If ESG matters are not well handled, you might fail to draw a line between ESG and the politics. How sure are we that actually 10,000 homesteads are going to be displaced? And the others will say, no, actually what we are going to displace are less than 2,000. And actually, even the 2,000 we are displacing, they are very happy. They are more than happy. That is going actually to go through one of the largest, very near one of the second largest water body in Uganda and in East Africa. And it's countered by saying, no, actually there's enough buffer distance left from whatever, from the natural water sources, the Lake Victoria and the rivers. So there's a very thin line, and that's one of the challenges. How do you draw that line between ESG matters versus the politics? One team is saying, European Union, leave our oil, Other team is saying, no, 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 we need to protect our community's climate and nature in Uganda. Stop that project. Politics having a thin line with ESG. Data collection and validation. Data for ESG is scattered everywhere, but it calls for a lot of consolidation, a lot of automation for us to go to the next level if you are going to report consistently and to have an auditable trail when it comes to ESG reporting. Wide scope. ESG is everywhere. From the entry to the exit of an organization, you'll be talking about ESG matters. Recently, you heard about in Uganda, again, I'll give an example of the recently signed off Anti-Homosexuality Act, which is now operational after the president assented to it. And it brought about human rights aspects. All those are ESG matters. So it's a wide scope, very delicate, that we need to manage very, very decisively. Greenwashing, I imagine many of you have heard about greenwashing, people misrepresenting facts. So, case in point, someone really knows that they are cutting out, for an example, you know, between yourself that you're actually having maybe cutting down 10,000 trees in your manufacturing process, people who are in wood production, timber and the like, and they say you're cutting out 10,000 trees per year, but you're actually also reporting that you're protecting the environment by doing an additional 200 trees per year. That is typical greenwashing. You want to misrepresent, portray yourself as if you're sensitive to the environment, when actually what you're doing has more impact than what you're doing to counter. And a lot of false reporting is also a very big issue when it comes to ESG reporting. Non-disclosure of critical but sensitive information in ESG. ESG is not ESG without transparency. Unfortunately, you will realize that many organizations, there is that information, they would always want to have it to themselves. However, you'll find that by nature, the finance people will always to keep some information to themselves until asked. But in ESG, you'll want to disclose as much as you can. Misrepresentation of ESG as a dog by the CEOs. This is also something members and colleagues you need to be very ready about, that you need to, they will look at ESG as a dog in a way that it only consumes, it doesn't bring in any money. When actually, when well presented to the CEOs, there is actually an underlying financial benefit to it. So it's really up to us to how do we change the tone of being looked at, of looking at ESG as a dog and not a cash cow. Oh, in the interest of time, thank you so much, people, for listening to me. Questions, comments are welcome. Thank you. Back to you, Angela.
Hello, everyone. Again, I'm back. So thank you, Isaac, for demystifying the fundamentals of speaker. So our next speaker's name is Ms. Shruti Ganguly. She is the head corporate sustainability and ESG solutions at Sattva Consulting, who is responsible for strategy development to benchmarking exercise, stakeholder consultations to materiality assessments, policy development to public ESG disclosures. She brings overall experience of 2 decades in the corporate and development sector. To name a few, we have American Express, HSBC, IBM, SAP Labs. Shruti is a postgraduate in computer science applications, and also she's a Lean Six Sigma Black Belt and an IBM certified Lean coach. Shruti will talk about looking beyond the frameworks with respect to ESG and sustainability. Over to you, Shruti.
Thanks, and thanks to for inviting me for this session today. Isaac, that was very well put. Thanks for everybody who's made it for the discussion today. If you can move to the next slide. Want to take a quick minute to introduce my organization. I represent an organization by name Sattva. We are almost 12 plus years organization in the space of social impact consulting. We work with all the key stakeholders and therefore in a very apt place to work with businesses in not just managing the impact, but also looking at the risks that we have. Angira, on the next slide, please. Thank you. This is a little bit on the footprint. These are the kind of organization. This is a very small number. We have a lot more. The slide couldn't fit, but moving to the next one. Yes. So for the next 5 to 7 minutes, I'm going to discuss a little about the business case. I'm going to talk about the industry view, and I'm going to also talk about a value chain lens and what we need to watch out for. One of the important things that we all have to understand is that while ESG is a topic that everybody is discussing, but it's not an old topic. It's something that the businesses have always had a part of their agenda. But why it makes it unique is businesses have always looked at financial indicators as something which makes the businesses sustainable. And as we move along, we've realized that it's also the non-financial parameters which will impact in some form or the other. Either it will be a risk or it will be an impact which we will have to watch out for. And the words that you see are often very interchangeably used. But what we also need to understand is that all of them is basically putting the pressure on the businesses to take accountability, to present information in a transparent way, help the organizations to prioritize what is important to them, and also take care that all the stakeholders who matter to the business are also being a part of the decision making. Hence, the terms have a certain connotation, but overall, the idea is to manage the climate crisis that we all are in. Moving to the next slide. These are the few keywords that we are going to anchor right now for the conversation. There are many more, which we will park it some other day. Climate change, we've been hearing it way too many times these days than what we would have heard when we were growing up. So pretty much a phenomena because of the actions that humans have taken and the emissions that we all have been generating for years without knowing. Sustainability is the idea of using the resources for our today's need without compromising what our future generations might require. ESG is basically a term used by investors where you are looking at the risk, and historically when we were looking at just financial metrics, now it is also about the non-financial assets and look at a long-term view to running a business with accountability and with some bit of transparency with all key stakeholders. SDGs, very briefly, Isaac mentioned this. This is from the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Pretty much the 17 of those SDGs are where most of the development indicators can roll up to. CSR, corporate social responsibility, as a connotation in India is purely for the communities where it cannot benefit the business, but globally it is about the responsibility a corporate has towards all its stakeholders, be it the employees, be it the value chain players, be it the investors, the consumers, the customers, and end-to-end, everybody who's associated with the business in a certain way. So once we have these keywords out of the way, let's move to the next slide. If you see the ESG's emergence, it has happened over decades. It started off earlier and from Industrial Revolution when we moved into the 1980s, it was but natural to look at the human rights and look at the EHS, the environment, health and safety of people. From there, it moved to the environment side where we looking at the resources more closely. Around 2000s, we moved toward the corporate social responsibility where the businesses started getting more and more pressure to also look at the people who they work with and contribute back to the society. And today, as you move into the 20s, we understand that it's critical to not look at each of these parameters in silos, but bring it all together as the ESG, where whatever is critical for the business to run, whatever it is critical for the environment to be stable, whatever is required to ensure that there is enough parity in the way the organizations and the stakeholders are benefiting from the business, it is all taken care of, and hence the ESG journey. Moving to the next slide. These are some of the data points which would just say how the push towards ESG is rising. There has been enough investor asks. There are assets which is getting created under the ESG umbrella. There are organizations who are today talking about disclosures in India. All of you who are following it, you would know about the BRSR, which is taking pretty much all the corporates listed and also expected for the non-listed to look at the reporting and disclosure in a lot more standardized way than what it has been done so far. There are obviously enough interest among consumers that today's generation is extremely conscious about where they put the money, and therefore a brand that an organization is going to build because of the decisions they make, the kind of communication they do, and the kind of resources they use and deliver, I think will make a lot of equity with the kind of people they work with. So moving on to the next slide. I think this has been enough spoken about, but very quickly, the business case for ESG is building the brand, looking at the risks, having the growth and sustainability and the opportunities ESG brings along, which would mean that if at all there is, we could diversify, you could look at products, you could look at working with giving newer jobs, identifying greener ways of operations, looking at more innovative solutions. All that comes under growth and sustainability, and then comes the culture and talent management. I can say it for a fact that when I started working two decades back, we were not as conscious as to where we were getting, which organization we were associated with. But today, I know when we hire people, people are extremely conscious to see how are we running our business internally, as much they worry about how are we perceived externally. So all these things are important for the business to execute. And what also matters is there is a cost to having these people, hire people, or having people to maintain the talent. And therefore, this has a very strong business case. And these are not just qualitative information. All this, if required, can be translated to a dollar number as well. Moving to the next slide. This is purely on the risk side. While when we talk about sustainability, ESG, I think we do speak about impact, which comes naturally to us, but we need to understand that there is a very strong business risk, which we are trying to mitigate through ESG. When we talk about risks, primarily there is a transition risk, there is a physical risk and a reputational risk. There are some examples and you can read through, but while I do that, I think it's also important to understand that these risks historically do not have any precedents, and we don't have too much to learn from and therefore adapt. That's one of the areas of concern, and therefore it requires a very collective thinking and collective action. The cost of adaptation is lower than the cost of mitigation. Most of the projects that we do today are around adaptation, but there is a very strong need to look at how do you mitigate the challenges which also exist on the ground. Levels of the risks can vary from an organization to an organization. It can vary from a geography to a geography. It can vary from a function in one part of the business to the other part of the business. And therefore, it requires a very unique strategy to be developed for the business as a unit. Lastly, all the risks that I have mentioned here are just not risks, but there's also an opportunity which is associated with it. There is no plan B. This is happening, and we have to look at how do we work on it otherwise. So when you look at transition risk, it can also be looked at, can we help become more efficient and do cost saving measures? That's going to hit your bottom line. Second, when there is a transition risk, can we help build better resilience by enabling our current people learn more skills, help understand the systems, processes, and the data to make decisions wisely? All that is an opportunity for us. Physical risk, we have, it's been long that people have looked at supply chain, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. More and more we are getting closer. The regulations are asking for the data. So the physical risk that we have in our supply chain can actually become a showstopper in the days to come. So the moment we enable them, our business risks is getting reduced. Similarly, we are talking about newer products, newer services, and for reputational, of course, if we go to newer markets with better products, green products, it's only going to help us become a better brand. Moving to the next slide, please. The left part of it, I think, has been covered by Isaac. If you look at the right side, the material risk of any business would depend typically on the way the business operations are happening, the kind of raw material usage we are having, which would mean what kind of sourcing happens, from where sourcing happens, how are we managing that material, how is it taken from start to the finish. All that would decide the materiality of your business, the ecological impact, and this could be right from the way of extraction to all the way to disposal. Human safety and well-being, they are risks as well, unless they are treated with the right kind of significance. It becomes very important to run a business without them. Working conditions, long-term impact on the health and safety, and skill availability. These are some of the factors. This is extremely illustrative at this point, but this for each business, for each function will decide what needs to be managed so that your business risk is optimized and your impact on your ecosystem is relatively less. Moving to the next slide, please. These are some of the examples. Some of them have a bad name already, and some of them have fairly a different kind of understanding about materiality, and hence I have taken 3 different businesses. So if you look at oil and gas sector, I think by nature it comes to it that they have got a strong carbon footprint. But is there something that we can do about it? Now, these are the areas where there is enough thinking, investment, resourcing that's going into it to see how do you reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. There is something core which can't be reduced and optimized, but there is also something which can be. And that's the balance that we will need to bring into the business. The product by itself, and this is what I want to highlight as well, sometimes your product is an upstream to another business. In the case of oil and gas, the plastic industry uses the petrochemical, and therefore that also is having an indirect impact on the way it is looking at the business. So it's important to look at our industry, our business, and see if there are alternatives possible. Secondly, manufacturing is fairly I think easier to comprehend because you kind of can visualize a business which is into manufacturing, and these are some of the areas where there are concerns. We know that what we are trying to solve for the business is also in some form bringing circularity into the business, looking at how can we recycle and repurpose, how can we reduce the amount of waste that goes into the landfill. Is there something where we can enable people and build competency in the system to manage some of the work which today is not happening with that bit of efficiency. IT by nature, people imagine that they probably don't have much of carbon footprint or their emissions, but the emissions that they generate is pretty much from the data storage, from the cloud, from the heavy attachments that go out. There are 2 sectors which influence every other sector, one being the BFSI and the second being the IT, because they and their clients actually are responsible for making the business operate in either green or not so green way. And if we are able to manage this through using the right kind of information and knowledge sharing, I think there is a possibility that we might be able to control some of this. Moving to the next slide, please. Reporting, I think we've spoken enough, but I wanted to quickly say that irrespective of which format of reporting goes in, the challenges have been fairly the same. We can move to the next slide and then I can perhaps take this along with it. Yeah. So if you look at we often confuse between a framework to a regulation to standards to reporting. If you look at the frameworks, they are pretty much the principles that are broad guidelines based on which you would build your report, what you would want to do in your business. Regulations are driven by obviously the legal guidelines, and therefore these are some from different geographies which we need to look out for. This is the level 1. If these are applicable to you, there is no other way but to follow them. And this is nothing, this is not sustainability, but this is more of way to get to sustainability is through managing the first level of regulations. If you look at the reporting standards, there are enough which are there. I want to quickly take through the reporting, the reading that we have. Reporting has been done forever for most of the organizations, but what it gives to us is it does not prescribe what data it has. So it gives you what is available with you, and you're reporting it in a certain format. When you're comparing the data between 2 organizations, it becomes very difficult to benchmark if they are following, even if the same standard, but the data may not be comparable. So the learning and the best practices therefore becomes a challenge. And I believe that is what SEBI through BRSR has been trying to solve for it. This is India's first report, which has been mandated for top 1,000 for the financial year 23. And most of the organizations have tried to do the earlier versions as well. What the report does is it very strongly gives 9 principles, and based on that, there are data points which ask for information around social, environmental responsibility, the board composition, the kind of products they have, the kind of responsibility they are taking towards the product from the way they are produced to the way they are managed. And at the same time, what is also important is that this data for the first time will also start getting reported into the Ministry of Corporate Affairs database, and therefore it becomes a single source of truth. Going forward, there are also more regulations coming as a way forward, and I would move to the last slide. So these are few things which have come in, and it would be good for all of us to keep an eye over this. So BRSR 4, which is also about the sustainability as a sustainable supply chains, and therefore the data from the supply chain is expected to come in, along with an assurance which has to come along with it, which means that there has to be somebody who has to validate that the data has been reasonably assured, and therefore it is worth its weight. And then comes the rating adaptations. There have been rating agencies, and there have been some bit of variation in the way it gets managed. So there is also a notification from them. And then there are ESG investing mandates, which SEBI is also looking at. So this is the space to watch out for. In India, things are changing very fast. But with that, I would end my presentation and would be open for questions eventually. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shruti. Thank you so much. Like, you actually told us what are the different insights on different kind of business cases with the risk getting involved, and also the evolving compliance along the value chain. Thank you so much. Our final speaker of the day is Ms. Mayurika Chakrabarti, who is head HSSE MASC Southeast Asia, who leads sustainability HSE in MASC South Asia landslides business, aiming for net zero by 2040, following AP Moller's MASC's ESG strategy. She has 18 years of experience in the field of sustainability and HSE across different sectors like oil and gas, iron and steel, pulp and paper, FMCG, energy, cement, and telecom. I have worked with the leading companies like ENY, ITC Limited, Vodafone India, JSW, and Kotak Investments. She is a chemical engineering graduate with a postgraduate diploma in business administration, and she also holds NIBOSH International Diploma in Occupational Health and Safety. Today, Mayurika will be talking about the digitization of ESG. Over to you, Mayurika.
So the huge burden that lies in terms of being the last speaker is, of course, trying to add value to a forum where already my co-speakers have added a lot of information and have shared a lot of knowledge. And I'll just try to keep up with the pace. So first of all, let me thank Excededia for arranging this conference digitally, virtually, in a world today which can definitely meet in one place. But I'm glad to see that this is happening virtually, thereby avoiding all the environmental, solution that we could have created by meeting in person, having as a physical event. So thanks to you. But it definitely is ensuring a platform for cross-pollination of ideas, and keeping with the ethos of this digital conference, I think I wanted to share certain thoughts, not specific to one particular industry alone, but how the use of digitization for ESG can actually enable us not only to have a better future for the generations to come, but also how it can directly have a positive impact on business performance. As some of us would already be knowing that digital infrastructure and services can have a significantly negative impact on sustainability. The internet and the associated infrastructure in itself, they account for nearly 4% of the total carbon emissions of the world. Having said so, digital can also be an engine for sustainability and engine for growth if it's positioned effectively, and also is at the center of an enterprise's strategy in the right way. So deciding where and how to use technology to solve a problem is basically going to be the key to a successful, sustainable business strategy. Angira, next slide, please. We've heard Isaac and Shruti cover a lot on the frameworks related to sustainability reporting, sustainability management. Where we stand right now globally is quite a well-established ecosystem for performance reporting related to ESG. It is definitely triggered by the need for end-to-end visibility to both internal as well as external stakeholders based on multiple frameworks. The moment we see multiple frameworks and some of which include not just guidance, but they are regulated. There's a need for us to have an interface wherein we are able to consolidate our performance and then allow data validation and transparency to the stakeholders that we are accountable to.
Analytics are critical enablers for strengthening the safety nets for enterprises, because that allows us to identify, reach, and serve all the potential stakeholders, the beneficiaries, and transparency is crucial to set and evaluate the current performance, and arrive at the baseline, set realistic targets, and work towards meeting them. Just give me a moment. Yeah. However, the scope is more for definitely using digitization more objectively towards improving operational efficiency coupled with ESG performance, and how we can improve the performance across industrial sectors. Now, just to give an example, we have all mostly heard of smart buildings. They are using technology solution to address a material environmental issues related to use of energy, use of water, and the other important resources. In this case, a solution element such as Internet of Things or artificial intelligence can help reduce carbon footprint, water footprint of corporate real estate. Now, we shall try and see how the scope for such solutions can be extended across other industrial sectors, not just the ones which are major energy or water guzzlers, but how they can be replicated more and scaled up to meet our objective of a more sustainable future. Next slide, please, Angita. Let us take a look at some of the examples of digital technologies to address the material concerns that we have. Most important being optimum resource consumption. Now, resources can be energy, can be water, can be the raw materials we consume, and the waste we generate. Let's take an example of, say, water. Water is used across industries for fabricating, processing, smelting, washing, diluting, irrigation, across industrial sectors. And it is just to get a perspective, the apparel industry alone is accounting for nearly 80 billion cubic meters of water per year. One metric ton of steel anywhere in the world on an average consumes the equivalent of more than 2 years of consumption of water for a typical family anywhere in the world. So how do we make use of artificial intelligence or make use of training of intelligent algorithms for making sustainability decisions in real time, which would otherwise not be possible humanly using human intervention? Because incorporating so many data points that no human can process in a timely enough fashion, we can possibly yield we can use cloud-based solution for water loss management. Now, typically based on experience I've had earlier, and also many of us will be encountering, I'm sure my co-speaker Isaac will resonate, because from UMMA is an electricity distribution company. So when it comes to managing losses, or rather reporting of losses, a lot of times we are also at a loss in terms of where are the unaccountable information related to water intake going forward. And we tend to all attribute it to the losses, right? So if we have a real-time monitoring of information, a real-time possibility of a cloud-based solution for water loss management that can consolidate information from multiple data sources, and the repair works can also be done accordingly on an immediate manner, we can definitely sense how we can contribute to the cause of optimum resource utilization. Circularity, definitely with more of blockchain being discussed across the world to trace a material's origin or waste exchanges for facilitating cross-sectoral as well as cross-industry circularity. Next comes sustainable sourcing. So we do have um, wearable devices, RFID tags, basically, that can detect and warn employees of health issues. And even geospatial data can be used to determine whether a project can pose a threat to some environmental aspect, whether water or wildlife. The next aspect is in terms of product transparency. Sensors and RFID tags can also trace a product's origin, while a circular economy platform can signal whether we need to refurbish, whether we need to refurbish a product or not. The last piece is product lifecycle management. IoT and artificial intelligence can indicate if there is a need for preventive maintenance, while connectivity also allows for remote diagnostics. With this examples of digital technologies, I think I would like to share some more specific examples of how uh, we are contemplating of using digitizations in the integrated logistics space. Angira, next slide, please. So many of you would be knowing that Maersk is an integrated logistics service provider, not just containerized, but even non-containerized logistics service provider. So uh, we are working a lot to arrive at solutions which will not only add to operational efficiency, but will also integrate ESG in the ways of doing business. Taking some of the examples in terms of how we can deploy digitization. Uh, One is in terms of warehouse operations, in terms of even security at the gate in, gate out processes, in terms of transportation, whether we are using track and trace application for tracking the movement of cargo as it moves from one point to another, whether we are using electronic permit to work system, or we are using artificial intelligence based video surveillance system and environmental and health and safety performance monitoring. So these are some of the possible uses of digitization that can be explored into. Next slide, please. Application of artificial intelligence typically in warehousing therefore can be clubbed into three main buckets, primarily in terms of management of cargo, management of vehicles, management of material handling equipment, and finally, personnel management. All of them have a significant bearing on various aspects of ESG, whether we talk about the ethical business practices or any other form of governance, whether we talk about uh, health and safety of the workforce, even in terms of the environmental impact or possibilities of reducing those impacts that we have in the business. Agir, I would like you to please play a small video of how this is artificial intelligence can be used for a simple exercise of packing optimization, where we can see uh, a simple solution embedded in an internal camera or even a CCTV can actually monitor whether the packaging is being done in the right way as defined in the SOP or not. So not only does it help us in identifying uh, possibilities of improving the operational efficiency, but also in reducing the time involved, but at the same time, in terms of using it for diagnostics, using it for identifying if anyone is demonstrating an unsafe behavior or any losses are happening. Shall we go on to the next slide, please? So the key features of the critical use cases can be in terms of not only using digitization for inventory analysis, truck movement, efficiency of operation of material handling equipment or manpower productivity, or packaging processes as we saw, but also in terms of detection of smoke and fire on a real-time basis through the use of these cameras and the solution embedded in them, to be able to generate an alarm and immediate action on them. And so is also the possibility of identifying unsafe behaviors by the workers on the ground. So, needless to mention that this kind of digitization requires some key features, including an interactive dashboard, PHS performance reporting, smart device integration, training and onboarding of the workforce, that they are being watched, and how is that we can make use of the features in the most optimum way, alerts on SMSs and emails, and even tracking for compliance. Next slide, please. Having said so, there is, of course, a need for us to use digitization in a smarter way. So, how can we use these ESG-centered dynamic dashboards for decision making related to sustainable supply chain management, whether in terms of sourcing, upstream or downstream transportation, in terms of mode, route, or truckload optimization? The important part of success of digitization will be only if this is getting deployed across the supply chain and not just for some specific enterprises. And this will be only possible, only feasible if there are scalable and easily available IT and IoT solutions. The key will be to also see in future how we are able to use artificial intelligence and IoT for predictive analysis, predictive analysis, or even predictions of the risks involved depending on the current scenario, whether we talk about physical risks or we talk about any form of risks that can generate because of our operations. On this note, I really thank for your patient hearing. That was all from my end, and looking forward to some questions and discussions hereafter.
Thank you, Mayurika. That was really insightful. While you guys were registering for the session, so we have already received few. So I was really overwhelmed with the quality of the questions, and it clearly showed your interest and enthusiasm for the session. So we might not be able to take up all the questions. So we'll start with few, and the certain questions also do write whatever questions you want to ask to these speakers. If we are not able to address them today, we will definitely get back to you with that. Okay, so moving on to the next questions. Okay, so our first question that was asked by Uchechi from Nigeria: how do we introduce ESG practices to the African scene? When will regulations be mandatory? Isaac, would you like to take that?
Thank you, Angina. Thank you, everyone. As I earlier said, ESG is already here in Africa. It's all about how early enough can we adapt. Adaptation is the way to go. When you look at ESG in totality, regulation is also knocking on its doors, especially when you look at regulated businesses. If you look at financial markets, already in East Africa, the Nairobi Stock Exchange has directed that all listed companies on a Nairobi Stock Exchange will have to actually to produce a sustainability report effective starting this year. By end of 2023, you need to have a sustainability report, and that's gone even ahead to define the standard in accordance with GRI standards. So regulation already is knocking on many of the regulated businesses. And with the enactment of many national laws on climate change, we are seeing this coming down regulatory environment coming tighter in the nearby future. Thank you.
Thank you, Isaac. Thank you so much. So the next question that we have, it's by Mr. Ajay Kamble from India, which is on carbon tax implementation in India. Shruti, would you like to take that up?
Sure, thanks. So again, whatever I say would be more of a hypothesis at this point of time, because it is emerging and the carbon markets will take its space as well. Most of the organizations, at least the big ones, had already started to voluntarily look at carbon markets and either have a internal pricing, or they would manage it through through at least accounting of the carbon credits. Transaction has been limited, but still happening in certain pockets. So if you look at the carbon tax implementation, I do see that happening. To start with, the CBAM, which has also been introduced, will impact our India market too, and so will be what we are going to be looking at from our government to put out certain taxes. So it's a matter of time. And if you notice, the kind of regulations which has come in the last 2-3 years is significantly higher than what would have happened in last decade or so. So it's just a matter of time, Ajay, and I would really believe that it will happen sooner than we think.
Okay, thank you, Shruti, with that. Moving on to the
Can I just
next.
add one point here? I
Yeah,
think
sure,
for the
sure,
benefit
sure,
of
Maya.
everyone, and Shruti, just
Yeah,
to
yeah.
add to the point. So basically, India has already introduced carbon tax in a way on coal, which is significantly used for some of the major energy intensive industries, not just for power generation but for steel making. So there is already a coal cess which has been increased from 50 rupees per ton, 50 Indian rupees per ton to 100 Indian rupees per ton. So which is equivalent to nearly $1 per ton. So it's a significant move. This has been levied for quite a few years, but in the years ahead, it is expected to increase. Just sort of adding this information for everyone's consumption.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayurika, for that. Okay, moving on to the next question. Readiness of Indian corporates in adopting ESG initiatives. Mayurika, anyone would like to speak on that? Mayurika, Shruti.
Maybe I'll take it up, and Mayurika, please feel free to add. So I think if you talk about the readiness, there has been a certain kind of reading the writing on the wall, really. Once the whole BRSR started coming in, most of the organizations at SATVA, we were also evaluating how many of them have been reporting, what's the kind of readiness they have in the way of the availability of data. And we recognize that even 2 years back, when we were looking at the data and we tried to put it on the BRSR template, we realized it was only a 30-40% readiness of data, which was available with the biggest of the top 200 companies. So it was perhaps because nothing was asked or prescribed. More and more now organizations are wanting to do it. However, there is also this BRSR Lite, which has been recommended for the small and medium enterprises or the unlisted ones to look at that and start to evaluate and report on important parameters. So there is, if the question is, do the Indian corporates need to be convinced whether it needs to be done? I think we have passed that place. Most corporates know it needs to be done. If the question is, are they ready for it? May not be, but the regulations also give them that space where they attempt it and they learn it along the way. So it is not going to be perfect. We know that getting the data, putting systems in places will take time, but there has to be a start. So readiness is there, the intent is there. Readiness may be taking a little more longer. Hope that answers.
Okay. So our next question, what is the role of EHS in ESG? This has been asked by Emily from Kenya. Isaac, would you like to talk about this? The role of EHS in ESG.
Yes, thank you so much, Emily, for asking this question. In simple terms, EHS is environment, health, and safety. I would say
Thank you, Isaac. So there's one question that has been asked by Sehrazad Pavri. He asked questions to Mayurika like, does Musk already use blockchain for ESG integration?
So, there are certain aspects I will not be able to diverge in this forum by virtue of, if you see that I haven't specified what Musk typically does. We are part of, as an integrated logistics provider, we form a very crucial part of the supply chain of our customers, which are basically enterprises, right? So in terms of, let's say, transparency, or in terms of transparency of environmental impact or social impact during movement, yes, there are steps being taken for ensuring transparency to customers based on the kind of product that they avail from us. There is something called emissions dashboard, which we provide to customers should they choose to avail it from us, which basically gives an overview of GHG emissions of an organization as the cargo moves from one point to another. I just tried answering that question, but I'm afraid I will not be able to diverge any more information on this.
Okay, got it. So the next question we have from Swaminathan Krishnamurthy. He asked, how do you foresee the ESG scenario moving in India in the next 5 years?
Can I take up that question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So I think, Swaminathan, we all know that India is now the 5th largest economy of the world, and with such kind of growth plan, there's a huge stress on the sustainability aspects of that growth, especially because the focus is on the growth of infrastructure. The focus is on the growth of manufacturing, and manufacturing, of course, requires the infrastructure to grow because of the movement of the manufactured goods, not just within the country, but also outside the country. So there is definitely a lot of thrust on ESG, and what Shruti was mentioning earlier, that there is a necessity for us to have that capacity to be able to meet those ESG requirements. While certain regulatory frameworks do exist, the policies do exist, but putting them into perspective, a simple example being, at the moment, we have nearly 30% of the electricity generated in the national grid is from renewable electricity. Now, there's a huge focus on increasing that to nearly 40% over the next 7 years' time. How that growth happens is definitely going to be a key factor for us to see how the impact of the growth that India is poised over the next 7-8 years. So while policies are in place, how they are implemented across sectors is something that really will have a lot of bearing on the ESG journey of India.
Thank you, Mayurika, for that. Okay, we'll take two more questions. One, the second last is, how do you integrate ESG fundraising and continued environmental and social issues? This has been asked by Ida from Kenya.
I take that up, and maybe one of my co-speakers can add to it. You would have seen that in Isaac's presentation, there were a very clear delineation of some of the standards which are used by industries, by the financiers also, I mean, by the investment institutions, whether banking or non-banking financial companies. Typically, IFC performance standards, there are 8 of them, which are based on World Bank's Equator principles. So to begin with, that's what you can look into. And of course, we have Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. We have quite a few reporting frameworks for the sector-specific investments also, which you can find out. But IFC performance standards, which are based on closely linked to the Equator principles of World Bank, will definitely give you some overview of how are investors looking at the ESG performance of the investments they are getting into.
Thank you, Mayurika. And I think just to add on what you said, we'll combine it with what in the chat room, what Beatrice is asking about the large variety of ESG standards. And I would say critical to note, if someone decides to say, I'm going into integrating ESG in my operations, you need to ask yourself around 2 or 3 fundamental questions. One, look at your industry. What are member standards? What are they using? The other one is your competitors within the same industry. You'll find that actually different companies have adopted different standards. It's also very, very important to look at your competitors. What have they adopted? Because in so doing, you're most likely going to share this information to the same audience, and they also want to compare mangoes with mangoes. So also looking at what standards your competitors have actually adopted will also support you to make sure when your reports are out there, there is comparativity. The third one, you'd want to look at looking at your audience. Who is my audience as I share this sustainability report? Am I sharing it for the investor to look at critical aspects for them to make an investment decision based on the ESG reporting? Am I actually looking at it for funders? Is it for the customers? Who are my critical stakeholder I'm trying to manage? Is it the employees? Is it a regulatory requirement that are clearly stipulated? Just like I shared with you, listed companies will soon be required to report as per GRI standards in East Africa. Those would also inform. And lastly, but not least, it's also very important to look at the emerging regulation within your business. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Isaac. Thank you, Mayurika. We'll take just one last question. This is from Dinesh Minaria, India, where he asks, what are the ESG priorities for Himalayan states?
So I'll take that question. So ESG, for one, while it does have a geographical preference, but it is not geographically driven. It will be the organizations and their responsibility, and therefore Himalayan ecosystem, which is extremely sensitive. It's one would be driven through the policy itself. The second would be organizations who are working out of that geography, be it through having a plant there, which is unlikely, but whatever smaller units that they would have, which is operating, or if there are people who are working out of that. So the businesses have to make specific policies based on what is happening in that geography and what could potentially be causing either the harm to the environment there or to the people who are there they're having enough opportunities, or they're having local available opportunities and resourcing in the space. So it is not driven by the geography, but the organizations who are working, the accountability will still remain with the people there and the administrative bodies there. So if that answers your question.
I'll just add to what Shruti you mentioned, just for the benefit of everyone to understand. So the way that, and I think we also covered it in our presentation somewhere, that the way to identify ESG that matters to you is basically the material aspects, and that varies from organization to organization, from business to business. The key is to do a stakeholder engagement, basically identify the stakeholders, do a proper stakeholder engagement to evaluate what are those material concerns, and then arrive at the materiality issues that you need to prioritize. Not everything may be on top priority for you to address, and this is not just linked to the geography, as Shruti mentioned, but the key is to do the right stakeholder identification, then the stakeholder engagement, and then arrive at the material aspects for your business.
And maybe one last thing, if they could add to the list, would also be the assessments. If they could also do their impact assessments of the way they are operating and how is it affecting the local ecology, might be useful.
Okay, thank you guys. Thank you so much for such wonderful answers. Okay, so we have come to the end of the session today. So I take this moment to thank everyone present here, the speakers, the audience, and also the Expedia team for joining and making the session kind of seamlessly engaging. And despite the ongoing evolution of frameworks and answers to ESG that everybody is finding, so integrating ESG, one thing that we realize is more important now than ever. So let's follow the trend is what I would say. Rather than follow, I would suggest that let's lead the trend. So, well, this is not the end. We have tomorrow as well with a new set of speakers and different set of topics to be covered. So you all can join the same link. Please do come. I'll see you there. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.